He stepped onto the plane, holding a worn-out hat and a ticket that looked older than time. The flight attendant glanced at him, then laughed. "Sir, economy's that way," she said, rolling her eyes. He smiled softly. "My seat says 3A. "Ma'am." She leaned closer, whispering loud enough for others to hear. "3A? That's business class, not charity." A few passengers chuckled. Someone quietly lifted a phone, pretending to scroll but recording the moment. But no one knew that before this plane would touch the ground, the same man they mocked would become the reason they were all alive. And when the pilot's voice echoed through the cabin, every single person went silent. Music softens. Camera slowly pans. To the old man's face, calm, kind, lined with years of wisdom. "Before we begin this story, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Type your country below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe kindness still matters, hit that subscribe button and join our family of storytellers. Now, let's begin." The old man's name was Isaac Williams, a 72-year-old retired mechanic from Georgia. His hands, calloused and rough, carried stories of decades spent fixing engines that no one else could. He wasn't rich, and he never pretended to be. But today, he carried something priceless, a small envelope in his coat pocket containing a letter from his late wife. It had been 5 years since she passed away, and today he was finally fulfilling her last wish, to visit their son in New York. It wasn't a vacation, it was closure. Isaac shuffled down the narrow aisle, passengers watching as if he didn't belong there. His shoes were scuffed, his jacket faded at the seams, but his eyes, calm, steady, and kind, met no one's in anger. He stopped by seat 3A, right beside a man in an expensive suit scrolling on his phone. The businessman sighed, irritated, shifting his designer briefcase aside without a word. Isaac gave a polite nod. "Excuse me, sir. Mind if I sit?" The man didn't look up. "Just don't touch my bag." Isaac smiled faintly, lowering himself into the seat. His knees ached, but his spirit didn't. A few rows away, the flight attendant, Chloe, young and sharp-featured with perfect red lipstick, whispered to her colleague, "Can you believe that old guy's sitting in business class? Must have sneaked in. Look at him." Her partner shrugged nervously. "Maybe his ticket's real," Chloe scoffed. "Please, that coat's older than this airline." They both laughed under their breath. Moments later, Chloe returned to check the boarding passes. She stopped by Isaac's seat, smiling with fake politeness. "Sir, may I see your ticket again?" Isaac handed it over without hesitation. She examined it, her expression faltering for a split second. It was a business class ticket, confirmed and paid for. But her pride wouldn't let her stop there. "Well," she said, forcing a smile, "if you need help understanding how the seat works, just call me." Isaac replied softly, "Thank you, miss. I'll manage." His voice was gentle, almost kind, the sort that makes people pause for a moment before their guilt catches up. But guilt didn't catch Chloe. Not yet. As the passengers settled, the hum of engines began. Lights dimmed. Outside, rain streaked the window, thin lines tracing across the glass like silver veins. Isaac pulled out the envelope from his pocket, holding it delicately. The corner was torn. The handwriting on it, faint, written in blue ink, read, "When you make it to New York, tell our boy I'm proud of him." He closed his eyes for a moment, whispering under his breath, "Almost there, Mary." Chloe walked past again, glancing at the letter. "Sir," she said, curtly, "please put your belongings away before takeoff." Isaac nodded, folding the envelope and slipping it back into his coat. She turned, muttering, "Unbelievable," under her breath. The businessman beside him adjusted his headphones, pretending not to hear. Only one person noticed everything. A man sitting in seat 1A wearing a captain's badge and civilian clothes. He was the airline's co-owner, traveling incognito to inspect flight quality. His name was Captain Ryan Blake, and his sharp eyes caught the smallest details. The way Chloe mocked, the way Isaac endured, the quiet dignity that said more than anger ever could. The plane lifted off the ground, city lights fading beneath them. Chloe smiled confidently as she strutted down the aisle, certain she'd restored order. But little did she know that before this flight landed, the man she'd just humiliated would teach everyone on board the meaning of true grace and what real strength looks like. The plane had settled into the clouds, cruising smoothly at 35,000 feet. Passengers reclined in leather seats, their trays lined with champagne and silver cutlery. In the middle of all that quiet luxury sat Isaac Williams, calm, humble, almost invisible among them. He looked out the window, mesmerized by the blanket of white stretching across the horizon. For him, clouds weren't just scenery. They were memories. He'd spent his life fixing engines that touched them, though no one on this flight could have guessed that. Chloe, the flight attendant, appeared again with her flawless smile, the kind that looked polished but never warm. She leaned toward the businessman beside Isaac. "Would you like white wine or sparkling water, sir?" He gestured for the wine. She poured it gracefully, her earrings glinting under the cabin lights. Then her eyes flicked toward Isaac. The smile thinned. "And for you, sir?" Isaac adjusted his glasses. "Just water, please." Her tone sharpened. "We serve mineral water here, not tap." Isaac nodded kindly. "Mineral's fine, ma'am. Thank you." She sighed, an exaggerated exhale, and poured it like it cost her pride to do so. A few rows back, two younger passengers exchanged grins, whispering behind their hands. When she handed over the glass, her hand accidentally tilted. A few drops splashed onto Isaac's sleeve. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "It's all right," he replied, dabbing his arm with a napkin. But her smirk stayed. Moments later, she returned for meal service. "Chicken or beef?" she asked curtly. Isaac hesitated. "Just something light. Maybe soup?" She rolled her eyes. "Sir, this isn't a diner. It's a flight. Chicken or beef?" "Chicken, then," he said softly. "Wonderful," she said, the sarcasm slicing through the air. As she turned away, the businessman beside Isaac muttered, "Guess they'll let anyone up here these days." Isaac said nothing. He simply adjusted his seat and looked down at the small, crumpled photo of his wife that he kept tucked inside his watch strap. Her smile steadied him. Always had. The hours passed. Laughter floated from rows ahead, a group of influencers recording themselves sipping champagne. Chloe lingered near them, her voice sweet and high when she spoke to them, sharp and cold when she addressed anyone else. At one point, Isaac tried to stand to stretch his legs. "Sir," she snapped, "please remain seated while the seatbelt sign is on." He glanced above. The sign was off. Still, he sat back down without protest. Her need to feel superior was clearer than the view outside. The man in seat 1A, Ryan Blake, watched it all. He wasn't just a co-owner. He'd been a pilot for 20 years. He'd seen storms, crashes, heroics. But what struck him most today wasn't turbulence. It was disrespect. A quiet man being treated as if dignity came with a ticket price. Ryan leaned toward a passing attendant, not Chloe, and whispered, "What's that gentleman's name?" "I'm not sure, sir," the attendant said nervously. "He boarded alone." Ryan nodded slowly. "Keep an eye on him. There's more to that man than she thinks." Dinner ended. Lights dimmed. Passengers drifted into sleep. Isaac sat awake, reading the same old letter under the faint reading light. He traced the handwriting gently, lips moving in silent memory. "When you make it to New York, tell our boy I'm proud of him." He closed his eyes, whispering, "Almost there, Mary." Chloe passed by once more, pausing to glance at the letter. Her tone softened for a flicker of a second, curiosity breaking through arrogance, but she quickly masked it. "Try to get some rest, sir. It's a long flight," she said mechanically. He nodded. "Thank you." Then she walked away, completely unaware that in just a few hours, when the plane would begin to shake and alarms would scream, it wouldn't be her calm voice passengers would look for. It would be his. The plane drifted smoothly over the Atlantic. The soft chime of the seatbelt sign echoed once, then faded. Everything felt peaceful. Too peaceful. Isaac sat quietly in 3A, watching the clouds glow under the moonlight. He wasn't asleep. Old. Habits never let him rest when flying. He'd always trusted engines, but he respected them too. Machines had moods, he used to say, and he could sense when one was about to turn. He glanced toward the window. Something looked off. The wings shivered, not violently, but enough to make his gut tighten. Then came the first jolt. A shudder rippled through the plane. Glasses rattled, a few heads turned. A child whimpered somewhere near the back. Chloe, the flight attendant, frowned and adjusted her scarf. "Just a bit of rough air," she said confidently to the passengers, but her voice trembled. Moments later, the captain's voice crackled over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing slight turbulence. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts." The second jolt hit harder. The plane dipped, once, twice, and someone screamed. Overhead compartments trembled. A bag fell, hitting the aisle with a thud. Chloe's confident smile cracked. She grabbed the wall for balance. Her colleague shouted, "We should secure the galley." "I know," she snapped, fumbling with a tray that spilled water down her uniform. The seatbelt signs blinked red. Chaos began to brew. The businessman beside Isaac cursed under his breath, gripping his armrest. "What the hell is happening?" Isaac turned, calmly. "Just turbulence, sir. Happens when the air currents shift. Stay seated and keep your belt tight." He spoke with quiet authority, not fear, but Chloe was panicking now. "Oxygen masks ready," she yelled, voice cracking. A child started crying loudly, the kind of cry that spreads panic faster than the shaking itself. Isaac unbuckled, slightly leaning across the aisle despite the jolts. "Hey, sweetheart," he said to the frightened girl, his voice warm. "It's okay. Here, breathe deep like this." He mimed slow breathing, steady and calm. The little girl followed. Her crying slowed. The turbulence worsened, trays clattered, lights flickered, and one of the cabin crew slipped, hitting the floor. Chloe froze. Passengers screamed for help, and in the middle of it all, Isaac stood up. "Sir, sit down," Chloe shouted, panic sharp in her voice. He ignored her. His instincts had already taken over, the kind that only decades of experience could shape. He moved to the fallen attendant, helping her back up. "Buckle yourself in the jump seat," he said firmly. She obeyed without question. Then he shouted, loud enough for half the cabin to hear, "Everyone, tighten your seatbelts. Heads down, hands over your heads. You'll be fine. Just stay." "Calm." His tone wasn't pleading. It was commanding, trained, familiar. People listened. Even Chloe did. The plane dropped suddenly. A violent dip that sent loose cups flying. A collective scream tore through the cabin. The child cried again, and this time Chloe's hands were shaking too badly to help her. Isaac knelt beside the girl, pulled the oxygen mask down and placed it gently over her face. "Good girl," he said softly. "Keep breathing. You're doing perfect." The cockpit door burst open slightly from the pressure change. A young co-pilot looked out, pale. "Sir, who are you?" he asked as Isaac steadied himself near the galley. Someone who's seen storms like this before, Isaac replied. Tell the captain, if the left engine's surging, pull power by 15% and level out. You're catching a microburst. The co-pilot's eyes widened. How could this old man know that? He ran back inside. Seconds later, the engine roar softened slightly, and the shaking steadied. 5 long minutes passed. The plane finally leveled. The passengers' screams turned to sobs, then silence. The lights flickered back to normal. Chloe's knees gave way as she slumped into the nearest seat, shaking. Isaac stood quietly in the aisle, breathing heavily but calm. He looked around, everyone alive, everyone safe. He smiled faintly and whispered, "That's my girl," as the engines purred steady again, as if he was talking to the plane itself. Chloe looked up at him, eyes wide with disbelief. How did you—" He gave a tired smile. "Old habits. I used to fix these birds before you were even born." Then he walked back to 3A, sat down, and stared out the window again, as if nothing had happened. Outside, the night sky stretched endless and silent. But inside that cabin, everyone's eyes were now fixed on the quiet old man they had mocked hours ago, their savior, sitting alone in seat 3A. The turbulence had finally stopped. Passengers were still trembling, some praying quietly, others wiping tears. The same people who had laughed hours ago now sat frozen, humbled, alive. Isaac sat in his seat, eyes closed, whispering something only he could hear. Chloe stood near, the galley, mascara streaked, hands trembling around a water bottle. She kept glancing at him, the old man who had just done what she couldn't. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice began, calm but shaken. "This is your captain speaking. We've stabilized, and we're now beginning our descent into New York." A few passengers clapped weakly, some even whispered thank yous. But then the captain paused. "Before we land," he continued, "I want to share something important. What happened up here tonight could have ended very differently, and there's someone among you we owe our safety to." The cabin went still. Every head turned, whispers, spreading like ripples through quiet water. "Seat 3A, the captain said slowly. "Mr. Isaac Williams," Chloe gasped. The businessman beside Isaac looked stunned. The captain's voice carried emotion now, respect, awe, maybe even guilt. "Mr. Williams isn't just a passenger. He's a retired chief mechanic and safety instructor, one of the men who trained our first generation of pilots. He designed the emergency response manual we still use today." Gasps filled the air. People looked around in disbelief. Isaac, humble as ever, shook his head gently, embarrassed by the attention. He whispered, "I only did what needed to be done." But the captain wasn't finished. "Sir, from everyone on board, thank you. You didn't just save this aircraft. You reminded us what true calm and courage look like." The plane began its slow descent through the clouds. Chloe's eyes welled up. She walked down the aisle slowly, stopping beside Isaac. "Mr. Williams," her voice cracked. I'm so sorry for how I treated you." Isaac smiled kindly. "Don't be sorry, child," he said softly. "Just remember, respect doesn't cost you anything." She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. The businessman beside him cleared his throat. "Sir, if you ever fly again, I'd be honored to sit beside you." Isaac chuckled quietly. "I hope the next flight's smoother than this one." Camera pans to the window, sunlight breaking through clouds as the city skyline appears. Below. The wheels touched down softly. Applause erupted across the cabin, genuine, heartfelt, united. The old man looked out the window, a tear glistening in his eye. He whispered, "We made it, Mary." The moment the plane touched the runway, cheers erupted through the cabin. Some cried, others clapped, a few simply sat in stunned silence, still trying to understand what had just happened. The same passengers who had laughed at the old man an hour ago were now staring at him with awe, gratitude, and guilt written across their faces. The flight attendant, Emily, was the first to stand frozen, unable to move. Her uniform was neat, but her pride was shattered. She stared at the old man, the one she had mocked for being out of place. Now he looked calm, his wrinkled hands resting on the armrest, his eyes closed in silent prayer. The pilot's voice came through the intercom, steady but emotional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we owe our lives to one man today, Mr. Elijah Carter, a retired pilot, decorated with the National Medal of Aviation, who guided us through a complete system failure using nothing but instinct and courage. Sir, thank you." Gasps filled the air. Emily's hand trembled as she covered her mouth. "A pilot?" she whispered. He was a pilot?" An elderly passenger nodded, tears in her eyes. "Not just any pilot. He used to fly rescue missions. My husband once worked with him in the Air Force." Emily's knees nearly gave out. She walked slowly toward him, her head bowed. "Sir," she whispered, voice breaking. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I didn't know who you were." Elijah opened his eyes and smiled faintly. The same calm, gentle smile from before. "It's all right, dear. You don't have to know who someone is to treat them with kindness." The words struck her harder than any reprimand ever could. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. As the plane's doors opened and sunlight flooded the cabin, Elijah stood up slowly. The passengers, one by one, began to applaud, not just for saving them, but for reminding them of something they had all forgotten. Respect has nothing to do with appearances. A little girl from seat 12B ran up to him and hugged his leg tightly. "Thank you, Grandpa," she said softly. He chuckled, patting her head. "You're welcome, sweetheart." As he stepped off the plane, news crews and airport officials were already waiting, alerted by the emergency call. But Elijah didn't stay to give interviews or receive medals. He just put on his old hat, nodded at the pilot who now saluted him, and walked quietly into the crowd, disappearing like a whisper in the wind. Inside the aircraft, Emily wiped her tears and looked around at the passengers. "Before we leave," she said over the speaker, her voice trembling, "please, take a moment to thank the people around you. You never know who might be the reason you make it home today." The passengers clapped again, some hugging, others wiping tears. Humanity, something lost in the routine of daily life, had returned to that plane. As Elijah exited the terminal, the evening sun bathed the runway in gold. He turned back one last time, looking at the aircraft that had almost met tragedy, and smiled softly to himself. "Still got it," he murmured. Then with slow, steady steps, he walked into the horizon. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more emotional true stories, and tell us in the comments. Would you have helped Elijah before you knew who he was? Your kindness can change someone's story, just like his. Change theirs.